The stars thinned, then vanished. Beyond the outer rim, beyond the pull of known gravity wells and the limits of galactic memory, there was only void. An endless stretch of black nothing, untouched by commerce routes or star charts. In that stillness, where no transmissions echoed and no navigational beacon dared pulse, a single fractured cruiser drifted, scarred, half-functioning, defiant, the Chimaera. She had fallen through time as much as space, torn from known hyperspace lanes by the tendrils of purgil flight, creatures of myth to some, navigators of forgotten stars to others. The jump had been sudden, violent, and now the ship hovered above a world no Imperial had recorded, suspended in a sky inked with swirling auroras and slow-turning moons. Peridea, ancient, unlabeled, yet waiting. Thrawn stood on the bridge, his posture straight despite the rumble beneath his boots, the way the Chimaera groaned like a dying animal. His uniform had lost its pristine edge, the white fabric now dulled by ash and wear. But his eyes, glacial and sharp, lost none of their calculation. They stared out beyond the viewport, where the world below seemed almost too still. He said nothing. Around him, officers murmured status reports. Systems down, power fluctuating, shields unstable, food reserves critical, no signals received, none sent. The stars here did not speak the same language. No response from the Empire, no echo of familiar structure. The ship had become a ghost in foreign territory. Peridea rotated slowly beneath them. Its atmosphere read as breathable but strange, oxygen-rich, tainted faintly with elements that had no match in Imperial databanks. There were continents visible through the haze but oddly shaped, mountain ridges that rose too sharply, ocean masses that shifted their borders with uncanny rhythm. Even from orbit, the planet felt watchful. When the time came, Thrawn gave the order. Descent. Engines whined. The Chimaera obeyed with a wounded beast's lurch, its vast underbelly slicing into the upper skies of Peridea like a falling blade. Clouds peeled away in silence. No defense systems fired. No signals hailed. The world simply received them, vast and unmoved. The crash was controlled, if barely. She hit soil near what might have once been a riverbed, now dry and carved deep into dark clay. The impact echoed for miles, disturbing flocks of winged things from the trees, long-necked, long-winged, silent as they vanished into cloud. When the dust settled, the air was still. The crew emerged in measured waves, led by officers trained for planetary survival. They wore masks at first, breathing cautiously, testing samples. The air tasted strange, floral, metallic, but not hostile. The world did not reject them. It simply remained indifferent. Structures loomed in the near distance, tower-like ruins, spiraling with eerie elegance, not built by the hands of the Empire, not shaped by droids or known galactic architects. The stone shimmered faintly under certain angles of sunlight. Patterns etched along the walls curled like forgotten alphabets. There were no doors, only archways, tall, thin, precise. Scouting parties were formed. Thrawn remained near the crash site at first, organizing salvage teams, deploying perimeter sensors, establishing basic power. The Chimaera was crippled but intact. Her core systems could be repaired, her databanks preserved, weapons offline, but there was time. There was always time. By the fourth day, they had mapped 20 kilometers in all directions. No signs of native civilization, no visible threats, but signs of something older, very old. Ruined staircases that led nowhere, pits filled with polished obsidian, statues of creatures no one could name. Everything weathered but intact, preserved not by design, but by absence. Time had stopped touching this place. On the 5th day, Thrawn walked the ruins alone. Officers protested, but he silenced them with a look. He walked beneath the tall archways, letting the shifting sunlight dance across his face. There were no carvings of war, no depictions of kings or conquest, only spirals, circles within circles, repeating motifs, patterns. That was the key. He studied them for hours. When he returned, his expression was unreadable, but his orders became precise. He redirected resources from long-range signaling to structural reinforcement. The ruins, he declared, would become outposts, observation points, shelters against the unknown, and the ship would remain grounded until further notice. No one questioned him. On the 9th night, a storm came. No thunder, no lightning, just wind, cold and impossibly fast. It swept across the plains, bent trees into groaning arcs, lifted fine ash into the sky. But at the eye of it, silence. Not calm. Silence, like a held breath. Thrawn stood outside the command tent that night, cloak pressed against his back, boots sunk into soft mud. He watched the horizon, where flashes of green light pulsed just above the treetops. Not lightning, something older, something alive. He said nothing. In the morning, there were new tracks near the perimeter, thin, three-toed prints in the mud, unfamiliar, not animal, too deliberate, but no alarms had been triggered, no motion caught, just the marks. Surveillance intensified. The 10th day brought whispers among the lower ranks, dreams of voices, shapes moving in the fog, static in helmet comms. One technician swore she saw a figure watching from a ridge, tall, unmoving, cloaked in feathers. The report was logged. Thrawn read it without comment, but that night, he did not sleep. Instead, he stood before a black monolith unearthed near the western ridge. A perfect column of unknown stone, unmarked by time or weather. It emitted no energy, no heat, and yet it hummed beneath his hand, just faintly, just enough to let him know he had not arrived by chance. Peridea had waited, and now it listened. Far above, stars unknown to the galactic core wheeled slowly across the sky. A different map, a different story. Thrawn, once Grand Admiral of the Empire, now stranded in a forgotten world, looked up and saw opportunity. Not in conquest, not in rescue, but in design. Chapter 2 would begin with what the ruins concealed, but for now the night held its secrets close. The mist never lifted completely on Peridea. It clung to the hills, poured down valleys like a lazy tide, and wrapped trees in a quiet sheen that blurred their edges. Even at noon, the light felt hushed. The sun, smaller and colder than the galactic cores, hung low, filtered always by the veil of clouds. Nothing was sharp. The world was soft-spoken. Beyond the crash site, the land unfolded with eerie symmetry. No straight lines, no jagged peaks or broken plains. Everything rolled, curved, or coiled. Hills spiraled outward like concentric waves. Trees arched gently, their trunks braided and barkless, glimmering faintly in the shade. Leaves floated more than they clung. They drifted in slow orbits around their branches, never truly still. The first scouting team moved in single file. Each step was quieted by the spongy ground, covered not in moss or soil, but a carpet of pale blue growths, each one humming faintly if disturbed. Beneath their boots the world felt alive, but never hostile. Watchful, perhaps, listening, and always distant. The wildlife came and went in silence. Nothing barked, howled, or cried. Even the winged creatures, great-bodied with trailing limbs and gliding membranes, moved like wraiths through the upper canopies. One passed overhead without a flap, its elongated body lit by a pulse of internal biolight, like a slow heartbeat. No one spoke as it passed. It felt wrong to break the quiet. Further inland, the landscape shifted. The hills grew taller, the mist thicker, until it formed a silver curtain broken only by movement. It was there they found the ruins again. Different structures this time, half submerged in dense foliage, their shapes more deliberate. Cylindrical towers buried to their necks, with surfaces smooth as obsidian and inscribed with shallow lines that followed no known syntax. Lieutenant Elros, the team's xenolinguist, ran his fingers over the patterns. No energy signature, no residue, just grooves in the stone, shallow and ancient. They didn't feel cut, they felt grown, as if the structure itself had emerged from the ground with the patterns already embedded in its surface. One ruin, half collapsed, revealed stairs winding downward. Not steep, wide and inviting, more worn than damaged, like they had been used often once, by many feet, over many years, and then forgotten all at once. No one descended. Thrawn arrived 3 hours later. He said little, walked the perimeter, took note of the placement of each tower, each spire. He asked for the topographic data and compared it with orbital scans. The structures weren't random. They formed arcs, massive ones, spanning kilometers. Circles again. The same theme etched into the monoliths near the ridge. The same geometry embedded in the soil distribution around the Chimaera's crash site. A pattern. Always a pattern. He returned to the half-collapsed ruin and stood before the open stairwell. The mist pooled at its lip, refusing to sink inside. Cold air spilled upward, dry and still. He did not enter. Not yet. By the 4th expedition day, they catalogued 15 unique species. None aggressive, none vocal. Many of them translucent or covered in feather-like filaments. One creature, no larger than a ration tin, approached the perimeter camp curiously. It floated rather than walked, propelled by small pulses of energy beneath its segmented body. When touched, it flickered briefly, turned a pale shade of green, and withdrew without fear. It left behind a trail of spores that evaporated on contact with air. The biologists were baffled. Samples showed complex DNA sequences that seemed to recombine under observation, forming new structures without external stimuli. Peridea's ecosystem was not just stable, it was self-adjusting, controlled by mechanisms not yet understood. Thrawn noted it, as he noted everything. He ordered scans to continue. But he shifted his personal attention to the ruins. In a glade where the ground bowed inward like the floor of an ancient amphitheater, the ruins formed a perfect ring. 12 columns, evenly spaced, untouched by time or weather. Between them, nothing but air. But no plant grew in that circle, no animal entered. Even the wind slowed. There was a presence there, not malevolent, but undeniable. A sensation of being watched without judgment, seen without consequence. The crew avoided it instinctively. Thrawn did not. He spent an hour there alone, hands clasped behind his back, eyes narrowed. When he returned, he ordered a permanent perimeter established around the glade, but no research conducted within it. Not yet. The site, he declared, was significant, but not to be disturbed without understanding. Some of the junior officers whispered about curses, about ghosts. Elros dismissed the talk as nerves, but even he admitted to hearing faint tones while standing between two of the columns, a kind of resonance, as if the stones hummed when aligned with a certain wind. In the evenings, fog curled tighter around the camp. Lanterns cast long, golden cones through the mist, and shadows moved just outside the light. Not figures, not forms, just shifts, slow eclipses of fog, as though something passed through but never stopped. One night, during third watch, a sensor caught a brief spike, a pulse of radiation unlike anything they had recorded. It came from beneath the spiral hill east of the main ruin, a deep, low-frequency wave that echoed only once, then stopped. Excavation teams were dispatched the next morning. They found nothing. The soil was unbroken. No entrance, no tunnel, just earth, packed, ancient, undisturbed. But still, the reading remained logged. Thrawn studied the data and said only, "It listened back." There were no further spikes. Still, the world moved. Mist shifted, leaves drifted without wind, and deep beneath the surface of Peridea, something unseen stirred, slow, aware, patient. By the 12th day, the crew stopped speaking of home, not from despair, but adjustment. The rhythms of the ship had given way to the rhythms of the planet. They rose with the pale sun, slept when the mist thickened. They no longer spoke of rescue. Thrawn hadn't mentioned the Empire once. Orders were followed, routines kept. But the crew no longer looked upward. They looked around. At a world that had not forgotten its builders. A world that remembered without speaking. And in the stillness, the ruins waited. Not as remnants of a fallen people, but as sentinels of something far older. Something that saw Thrawn not as a trespasser, but as a participant. The first structure rose from the ridge like a broken crown, half swallowed by roots that coiled down its sides like petrified serpents. No metal, no duracrete. It was made entirely of stone, dense, grey-green, untouched by rust or corrosion. Its surface was smooth in some places, jagged in others, and every inch carved with deliberate markings. They were symbols, not letters, not language in the traditional sense, but organized, repeated, layered in ways that implied purpose. Thrawn approached it slowly, his boots silent against the soil. The scouting unit had secured the perimeter hours earlier. Motion sensors triggered nothing. The wildlife here did not come close. It was too quiet. Even the breeze paused near the base of the temple, as if the air itself hesitated. The structure had no entrance, no clear windows or visible means of access. Only a narrow slit running along the side, a vertical gap, just wide enough for a man to pass through sideways. It led inside to a chamber shaped like an inverted cone, the walls lined with glowing crystals embedded in hexagonal clusters. They pulsed softly in sequence, one after another, clockwise around the room. No power source could be found. Thrawn stood in the center, arms behind his back, head tilted slightly as he watched the light dance across the floor. The carvings were different inside, more intricate, less repeated, as though whoever made them moved from pattern to intent. He reached out, tracing a symbol with one gloved finger. The moment his skin touched the stone, the light dimmed, then flared brighter. Only once. He did not move again. By nightfall, 3 more structures had been discovered within a 5-kilometer radius, all roughly the same design, same height, same triangular base, but each with unique interior symbols and crystal arrangements. Elros took images, began matching repeating segments across the different chambers. A structure emerged, not phonetic, not pictographic, but something layered. Symbol sets that mirrored stellar arrangements, others that mimicked waveforms. The planet was speaking in geometry. A 4th temple was unearthed beneath a collapsed cliff face, this one larger, its entrance blocked by a wall of compacted soil and root systems. Excavation began immediately. Thrawn remained nearby, sketching the surrounding terrain by hand. He marked where the sun touched the hills during its arc, tracked the shifting shadows of nearby peaks, logged the locations of each ruin in precise coordinates. They formed a spiral. Again. The interior of the fourth temple was different, colder, lower. The air changed at the threshold, heavier, tinged with something metallic. The walls bore no crystals, only symbols, carved deep and raw into black stone that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The lines here were jagged, intersecting, sharp, not violent, but urgent. At the center stood a raised platform, circular, waist-high. Its surface was smooth, untouched by time. When scanned, it revealed no density variance, no hidden compartments, just stone, pure and exact. Thrawn stared at it for several minutes in silence, then instructed the others to leave the chamber. When the last footstep faded, he walked to the platform and placed both hands on its surface. Nothing happened, but something had changed. Not in the room, in the air around the site. A low vibration began at midnight, barely perceptible. Equipment picked it up first, sensors spiking with no visible source. It lasted 3 minutes, then stopped. When dawn came, the soil around the fourth temple had shifted slightly outward, forming a perfect ring around the structure. The roots that once wrapped the stone had pulled back, shriveled and blackened at the ends. Thrawn called off further digging. No questions were answered. Orders were followed. The next day, he gathered the highest-ranking officers and presented his hypothesis. Peridea had once been inhabited by a civilization advanced enough to manipulate energy through geometric structure alone. Their buildings weren't just shelters, they were conduits, resonance chambers, designed not for war but for communication, not outward but inward. He pointed to the symbols, their patterns, their alignments with the planet's magnetic poles. He noted how the crystals reacted not to heat nor motion, but presence, conscious presence. Observation itself triggered the change. These structures were aware of being watched. Elros questioned how such a society could vanish without trace. No tools, no bones, no dwellings beyond the temples. Thrawn answered simply, they were not erased. They retreated, beneath or beyond. And if they left a message, it would not be written in language. It would be in structure, in form, in how space itself was shaped. From then on, the temples were mapped, but not entered unless necessary. Each new site added clarity to the pattern. A total of 17 structures by the end of the second cycle, all forming precise arcs along fault lines and ley paths. Natural energy corridors in the planet's crust. A design that suggested long-term intention, centuries of planning, possibly more. Each structure was built to last, and each still functioned in a dormant way, waiting for a key. Thrawn studied them with the patience of a strategist and the curiosity of an archivist. He did not rush conclusions. He made no predictions, but his notes grew longer. His time in the temples grew more frequent, and his questions became increasingly abstract. He asked Elros once in private if silence itself could be a signal. The lieutenant had no answer. Peridea offered no direct response. But with each day, the world felt less like a place and more like a construct, a vessel, one not meant for mass habitation, but for preservation, not of people, of knowledge. By the end of the third week, Thrawn stopped calling the structures ruins. He called them archives. And the archives were not dead. They were waiting. Rations were measured to the gram. Protein packs sliced into thirds. Water filtered twice before storage. What remained of the Chimaera's emergency supplies was stacked and inventoried with the precision of a siege. Every calorie counted, every tool accounted for. Waste was not tolerated. A makeshift mess hall was constructed near the rear starboard flank, where the hull had split open into a jagged canopy. Beneath it, Cooking stations were assembled from salvaged plating and repurposed heating coils. Meals were dull, repetitive, and short. No one lingered. After eating, trays were returned without instruction. Discipline filled the air like pressure before a storm. Sleeping quarters were assigned based on rank, skill set, and shift cycle. There were no private spaces. Tents lined the base perimeter, each labeled and color-coded according to duty. Lights out came with the sunset. Guard rotations turned every 6 hours, regardless of weather or fatigue. The engineers worked the longest. Buried in the ruined systems of the Chimaera, they tried to restore something, anything, that could bring the ship back to life. Power converters were fused, communications relays twisted beyond repair, yet every day they returned to it. Not because they believed, but because Thrawn expected it. He said little, but observed everything. Every cracked boot, every trembling hand, every pause too long at the mess line. He did not need to reprimand. Presence was enough. Morale was quiet, but strained. Fractures formed beneath the surface, not loud, not violent, just small things. Delayed responses to orders, conversations cut short. Fewer voices during downtime. Laughter had become rare, frowned upon even by those who once indulged it. One evening, 2 crewmen fought near the power tent. No weapons, just fists and frustration. The reason was trivial: disagreement over storage rations. The punishment was swift: confinement under guard and reassignment to night watch. Both complied, neither argued. Thrawn never addressed the incident directly, but the next morning's orders included a new rotation: 3 hours of physical training every 4th day. Measured exertion, sweat as discipline, routine as release. It worked. The weather complicated everything. Mist that never cleared. Rain that fell without thunder, without warning, and with no rhythm. It soaked clothing, warped equipment, filled boots, and made even the simplest task feel heavier. Tents sagged under its weight. Fires took longer to light. Tempers wore thinner. One by one, small illnesses began to spread. Rashes, coughs, sleep irregularities. Nothing fatal, but enough to remind them this world was not theirs. Dr. Voss, the ship's chief medical officer, established a field med bay near the base of a broken landing strut. Supplies were limited. Improvised remedies became standard. Local flora was studied with caution. Some plants had antiseptic properties. Others caused hallucinations. Every sample was logged, catalogued, stored in vacuum-sealed canisters labeled with hazard levels. Green tags for safe, red tags for unknown, black tags for burn on contact. There was no talk of rescue. No one asked. They knew what exile meant. Thrawn never lied to them. He never promised extraction, nor implied a timeline. He spoke of objectives, efficiency, systems that must be stabilized, mapping that must be completed, structures that required analysis. His language remained practical, his tone devoid of emotion. That clarity was what kept them steady. He conducted meetings at dusk, beneath the leaning remains of the forward command module. They stood in a circle, boots pressed into soft ground, data pads in hand. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, every word carried weight. Even tired officers stood straighter in his presence. He outlined goals that stretched weeks ahead, assignments that would take months to complete. He imposed long-term thinking on minds that struggled to survive the week. It worked because Thrawn moved through every space as though none of this was failure, as though this exile was simply part of the plan. Some believed it. Others followed him because the alternative was chaos. Whispers began. Small, fragile ones passed during gear checks or between watch shifts. That the Grand Admiral had already calculated the route back. that he knew something about the planet they didn't, that this was all preparation, a rehearsal for a greater purpose. Thrawn neither confirmed nor denied. His days were spent studying the ruins, analyzing soil data, directing crew shifts. His nights were spent alone inside the salvaged forward ops chamber, poring over schematics, planetary rotation charts, and radiation logs. He requested no assistance. When his presence was needed elsewhere, he appeared as if he had never left. He assigned secondary leaders across every unit, empowered lieutenants to make decisions, distributed responsibility so that no single failure could unbalance the structure. Chain of command was fluid, but unbreakable. Loyalty was maintained through clarity, respect through consistency. He knew the edge was near, the one that turned fatigue into despair, so he kept them moving. Scouting missions expanded in range. Surveying teams were paired with field analysts to reduce idle time. Maintenance crews rotated between ship repair and terrain clearance. There was no time for idleness, no space for emotional drift. Each breath of wind carried silence, but beneath that silence was pressure. The crew adapted slowly. By the end of the third standard month, they spoke less of the Empire and more of the schedule. They no longer looked to the sky. They watched the perimeter. They reported sightings. They followed routines like ritual. Discipline became culture. And in that culture, Thrawn remained the fixed point, not as comfort, as necessity. The first sighting came during a patrol sweep northeast of the Crystal Gulch, a movement between trees, too smooth, too intentional, not an animal. Sergeant Keln signaled the unit to stop, weapons raised, eyes scanning the fog. Then nothing. Just mist curling between branches and the faint hum of insects in the distance. But when they returned to camp, a woven talisman was found tied to a sensor post. Twine made from fibers no one had catalogued, looped around a bone shard shaped like a crescent. Thrawn was informed. He ordered the object preserved, not touched further, not analyzed. Not yet. It was not a warning, he said. It was a message. 2 nights later, they appeared again, this time closer. 3 of them, standing at the edge of the western boundary. Still, unmoving, almost statuesque, humanoid in shape but taller, thinner, covered in long robes made of bark-layered silk that shifted as if breathing. No weapons, no lights, just presence. They watched for 20 minutes, then they vanished. No footprints were found. Thrawn did not send scouts after them. He waited. On the 5th night, the beings returned. 7 this time. Same posture, same silence. But one stepped forward and placed something on the ground. An orb, translucent and faintly pulsing, resting on a leaf as large as a man's chest. Then they retreated. Again, no chase was given. The orb was retrieved and brought to Thrawn. It held no power source, no internal circuitry. But when light touched it, glyphs flickered along its surface, glyphs that matched the ones found in the deep temple ruins. The same curvature, the same layered symmetry. This was no tool. This was recognition, a sign of shared history. Thrawn did not respond immediately. He studied the object for 2 days, then left a response at the same location. A single data card encoded with visual files, maps of the nearby region, catalogued images of the ruins, scans of the soil, and audio logs of the wind patterns. An offering of shared understanding, nothing more. The next night it was gone. Weeks passed. Appearances continued. No words exchanged. No gestures beyond the occasional placement of objects. Herbs, artifacts, shaped stones, symbols etched into bark and hung from branches like low-hanging fruit. Thrawn began assembling a catalogue. Elros was tasked with deciphering the placement patterns. Dr. Voss analyzed the offerings for medicinal properties. They learned the locals had no interest in machines, no interest in weaponry. They responded only to observation, not aggression. Their movements aligned with planetary shifts, moons overhead, wind speed, fog density. They came only when the air was still and the earth quiet. Eventually, Thrawn left something more deliberate. A sculpture crafted from Chimaera scrap, a layered structure designed in the shape of one of the temple spirals, but adjusted slightly, incorporating elements from their offerings. A hybrid expression of imperial logic and native form. It was accepted. Days later, a shaped stone was returned, identical in contour to the metal sculpture, but carved from a crystal not found anywhere on the planet's surface. A language of shape had begun. The crew grew restless. They wanted names, classifications, definitions. The beings had none to offer, no language to decode. They communicated through objects and presence, through arrangement and absence. Their patience far outpaced human rhythm. Thrawn adapted. He stopped expecting dialogue. He started observing behavior. He tracked their visits according to lunar alignment and gravitational flux. He marked how they stood, what direction they faced, when they moved. He constructed charts detailing posture variance, robe texture, head inclination. Patterns emerged. He followed those patterns like he had studied enemy formations in war, except this time there was no enemy, only potential. One morning, a message was left not near camp, but inside it, placed on Thrawn's own table beneath the covered awning where he held meetings. No one saw them enter, no alarms tripped, no surveillance footage caught movement. The message was a shard of black crystal, smooth on one side, jagged on the other. Etched into the polished face was a spiral intersected by a single vertical line, a symbol seen once before, buried deep within the archives beneath the collapsed ridge temple. Thrawn understood. This was a test. He left no response that day, nor the next. Instead, he resumed regular crew functions. Rotations continued. Scouts mapped new regions. Engineers repaired modular shield panels. The camp maintained its rhythm. On the fourth day, Thrawn placed a slab of metal beneath the same awning. On it, etched by hand, was the full glyph pattern from the Ridge Temple. Below it, the calculated coordinates of each ruin found to date. It wasn't a reply. It was a proposal. That night, the beings entered again. This time, two stood at the base of the slope, while one stepped forward into the open camp. It moved slowly, carefully. No sound, no fear. It stood before Thrawn, who remained seated. The two looked at one another. Then, the figure raised a hand, not in greeting, but in display. On its palm, a spiral, drawn not in ink or paint, but faintly glowing beneath the skin. Bioluminescent, the same spiral. Then it turned and left. From that point forward, cooperation changed. The natives began to lead. They guided scouts to hidden springs and nutrient-rich valleys. They placed markers where the ground grew unstable. They left fungi near the medbay that eased sleep and reduced inflammation. They taught not with words, but with presence. A turn of the head, a pause at a path, a gift placed near an item just repaired. They knew what the crew needed before the crew did. Thrawn did not call it an alliance. Not yet. It had no terms, no mutual defense, no shared infrastructure. But it was movement, and for now movement was enough. The first breach came at dawn. The clouds split open in absolute silence. No thunder, no wind. Just a widening chasm in the sky that shimmered with a faint violet hue. Then, without warning, they emerged. Purgil. Massive, slow, and gliding through the upper atmosphere like ancient gods passing between realms. Their bodies pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that shifted rhythmically along their sides, glimmering like constellations in motion. They moved not in flocks, but in long, spiraling trails, weaving through the air with grace no machine could replicate. The crew watched from the ridge, speechless. Even hardened officers with no interest in biology found themselves rooted in place. The creatures defied everything taught in Imperial charts. They were myths made real. Star whales, drifting through skies they had no reason to visit, their bellies glowing with latent hyperspace energy. Thrawn arrived minutes later, silent as always. He raised no binoculars, took no recordings. He watched with the same expression he wore when facing warships, calm, focused, calculating. For the next 3 weeks they returned. Not daily, not predictably, but when they came, it was always the same. The skies would quiet, the air would grow still, then light would bend as if drawn towards some unseen center, and the Purrgil would appear, never rushed, never late. Thrawn ordered an observation post constructed at the highest natural elevation in the region. Not a platform, just a flat section of dark stone reinforced with ship plating and equipped with long-range visual sensors, weather monitors, and a triangulation beacon array. Its only purpose, to study. Every known fact about the Purrgil had come second-hand. Ancient charts, wild tales, scraps from Outer Rim explorers. The creatures were said to be migratory, erratic, capable of hyperspace travel, yet bound by instinct, not navigation. Thrawn did not accept that. If they moved through hyperspace, they followed something. Not chance, not emotion. A pattern. The observation team was hand-picked. Technicians trained in anomaly tracking, pulse wave telemetry, and deep orbit gravitational mapping. Elros was brought in to cross-reference visual markings with known stellar groupings. Even the native allies began leaving behind carved stone circles, their spirals increasingly mimicking Purrgil motion. They understood more than they showed. Thrawn began mapping the sky, not with known constellations but with reference to the whales' positions, where they emerged, where they passed, the speed of their descent, the intervals between sightings. It wasn't random. He noted the fluctuations in the clouds just before emergence, the shifts in magnetic fields, the pulses from the planet's crust that rose subtly through the Earth when the whales entered low orbit. They weren't just gliding, they were responding to something below. Seismic plates began to resonate just hours before a breach. Thrawn had sensors buried in the ground to record them. The vibrations were slight, shallow tremors, but consistent, always along the same vectors, always at the same depth. The whales were listening. Somewhere on Peridea, beneath stone and fog, something called them. Once, during a particularly long breach, a Purrgil hovered low enough for its shadow to cast a full eclipse over the camp. The temperature dropped 5 degrees in less than 30 seconds. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, shifted slowly, glowing deep blue as it passed. It made no sound, yet somehow every member of the crew felt something in their chest. Not fear, not awe, pressure, like being measured. Thrawn recorded the trajectory and compared it with the coordinates of every ruin discovered so far. There was alignment. The whales were circling a specific region, one they never touched but never strayed far from. A plateau marked with scorched earth and no ruins, no wildlife, no native offerings. The silence there was complete. Even the wind moved around it. He dispatched a ground unit to the site. They found nothing but dry stone and dead moss. No radiation, no signal, no history. But the Purrgil circled it again the following day. This time, Thrawn observed them not through equipment, but through reflection. A pool of rainwater had gathered along the surface of the command platform, and in it their mirrored forms distorted with the curvature of liquid. That night, he wrote a single note in his private log. They see what cannot be scanned. By the sixth recorded breach, the Pergil began changing formations mid-flight, no longer in spirals, now in sequences, angles, triangles, sharp cuts through the clouds that matched hyperspace vector paths. Each maneuver recorded, replayed, and broken down. Elros found something. A correlation between the movement and ancient star charts from the unknown regions. The trails mirrored lost migration routes from thousands of years prior, routes that no longer appeared on Republic maps, routes that predated many known civilizations. The whales weren't just traveling, they were remembering. And memory, for creatures like these, was movement. Thrawn began modeling the behavior. Hyperspace windows based not on ship computation, but biological timing. The rate at which the Pergil pulsed their light before entering a breach. The position of their tails. The rhythm of the bends in their motion. Signals, cues, instructions. Unspoken, but consistent. He submitted a theory to the engineers. If they could sync a hyperspace beacon with the whale's resonance cycles, if they could mimic their pulse sequence in harmonic frequency, it might be possible to piggyback a signal, or even a jump trajectory. The engineers stared at the data for hours. There was no precedent for this kind of navigation, but none of them dismissed it. Because the math worked, the whales were not anomalies. They were maps, organic, ancient, fluid in design, but still maps. All Thrawn had to do was follow and wait. Beneath the southern ridge, beyond the broken spiral stones and moss-choked walkways, a new chamber was unearthed. Not through excavation, but exposure. A landslide revealed it after a night of low tremors, its entrance concealed behind a false wall of natural stone. A clean, geometric opening stood behind the rubble, perfectly shaped, as if waiting for erosion to peel back its disguise. Thrawn received the report and walked the path himself. Inside, the air changed, thicker, denser. It did not move the way wind should. It pressed inward, not unpleasant, not heavy, but purposeful, like passing through a veil. Lights flickered and dimmed upon entry. Static crackled faintly across comms. Elros called it interference. Voss said the readings resembled electromagnetic fields produced by certain minerals. Thrawn didn't argue, but his gaze lingered. The room stretched wide, deeper than any previous chamber. The walls, blackened with age, held no crystals, no offerings, no symbols of rule or conquest, only spirals, dozens of them, all drawn in exact proportions across every surface. Each spiral began in the center of a different star symbol. Each one terminated in the same glyph, a single vertical line crossed at the base with a sharp diagonal stroke. It was not imperial, not native, but it was familiar. Thrawn had seen a similar shape before, in Jedi archives, and Sith ones. This was a force mark, ancient, preceding modern orders, from a time before the divide between light and dark, a time when the Force had no sides, only presence. He studied the layout from a raised platform at the chamber's center. His boots echoed softly on the smooth stone as he paced slowly, calculating distance, pattern, orientation. The spirals weren't random. They followed gravitational alignment. He marked 3 of them that matched the same trajectory Pergil had taken 2 weeks prior. Movement, resonance, memory. He returned to the platform and stood still. The air shifted again. No breeze, just a subtle hum beneath the skin. like standing beside power not yet activated. The Force had left something behind here, not a message, not a warning, but a trace, a memory imprinted into form. The next day, he dispatched a silent team, no weapons, no scanners, no synthetic materials, just fabric, rope, and charting instruments. He instructed them to observe without touching. They obeyed. No living beings had entered that space in centuries, yet moss grew in patterns, untouched by sunlight. Stones pulsed with warmth beneath gloved fingers. One crewman reported hearing a tone, soft, rhythmic, only when standing still for long enough. Another claimed to see echoes in his periphery, shadows trailing movements that hadn't occurred. The stories weren't dismissed. They were logged, catalogued, reviewed nightly by Thrawn himself. He held no belief in mysticism, but patterns did not require belief, only recognition. Back in his private chamber, he compared the chamber's designs with Jedi records he'd memorized during his time in the Empire. Holocrons confiscated from temples, records from the fall of Coruscant's archives, personal memoirs written by fallen masters. There were matching forms, recurring frequencies, chants encoded in musical notation that mimicked the same spiral ratio found on Peridea's walls. The ancients here were Force-sensitive, not aligned, not warriors, but attuned. Thrawn updated the mission classification, no longer ruins, not archives, not temples, nodes, anchors for the Force. If they had been designed to contain or magnify the Force, then Peridea itself might not have been chosen by accident. It may have been constructed, not in the artificial sense, but shaped, influenced, tuned to amplify what others merely touched. Elros suggested that the planet's gravitational anomalies, its lack of signal clarity, its strange time drift readings, all could be symptoms of Force saturation. Voss agreed reluctantly. No biological anomalies were detected in the crew, but dreams had become more vivid. Even waking thoughts had taken on a certain weight, like being watched by memory itself. Thrawn took note. He began testing the limits, not through meditation. That was not his way, but through interference. He ordered a small, low-frequency pulse array installed beneath the chamber, non-invasive, subtle, designed to emit silent bursts of harmonic disruption. Each burst triggered only once per day, measured, controlled. After 3 days, the readings changed. The spirals on the walls shimmered faintly in infrared. One glyph rotated slightly, no more than 2 degrees. It reset by morning. No sensors registered movement, but it had turned. He ordered the array shut down. Peridea was not inert. It was aware. Not intelligent, perhaps. Not alive in the conventional sense, but reactive. Force energy stored in structure, reacting to sound, to thought, to movement. That reaction was not emotional. It was mechanical, as if the Force here behaved more like gravity, pulling, bending, anchoring, refracting. And if that were true, then hyperspace, the medium the Purgil used, the key to returning home, could be tied directly to these structures, not through machines, but through resonance. He began walking the spirals each night, alone, counting his steps, breathing slowly, not seeking connection, seeking rhythm, data. On the 7th night, as he stood still in the center of the main glyph, the lights in the chamber dimmed. The air grew warm, and for 3 seconds he felt something behind him. No presence, no voice, just direction. He turned. There was nothing. But when he looked back at the glyph beneath his feet, the diagonal stroke had faded slightly. He did not speak of it, but in his logs he wrote, "The Force does not favor. It responds." From that point, he treated the ruins as living systems, Not sacred, strategic. The site was chosen with precision. High ground east of the ruined temple glade, just beyond the reach of the mist line. A flat plateau layered in thick stone, unaffected by recent tremors and blessed with uninterrupted visibility of the northern sky. The location offered no tactical advantage, no cover, no defensibility. That didn't matter. It had line of sight to the stars. Thrawn gave the order with no ceremony. A new structure would be built, not to house, defend, or conceal, but to call, the beacon array. The crew moved quickly, not with urgency, but efficiency. Metal plating repurposed from the Chimaera's shattered comm tower became the foundation. Power cells salvaged from deep storage were wired into concentric rings, built to amplify pulse frequency without drawing attention. The design was minimal, no high pylons, no visible antenna, just nested coils beneath a reinforced surface, tuned to emit in silent rhythm. This was not meant to broadcast a distress signal. This was meant to guide a path. While the engineers laid down the coils, the mathematicians and navigators gathered data from months of Peridea sightings. Positioning, trajectories, intervals between breaches, wind speed, starlight refraction, magnetosphere tension, every variable plotted and replotted. Thrawn stood behind them, offering no correction, only observation. He knew what to look for. He waited until they saw it too. The path home wasn't linear. It wasn't even fixed. The Peridea followed something older than mapped hyperspace lanes, a thread of gravitational memory etched across space, like grooves in a record. They weren't navigating by light or mass. They were following resonance. Thrawn ordered the beacon tuned to mimic that resonance, not in sound, but in harmonic energy. The pulse would ripple outward, undetectable to standard sensors, but felt by those creatures capable of hearing the subtle shift in space-time, a whisper beneath the noise of stars. It took 41 days to calibrate. Each test was short, one pulse at a time, then silence, waiting for any shift. Any signal returned. Nothing came. So they kept refining, adjusting, narrowing. The nights passed slowly. The plateau became sacred in its silence. No crew slept nearby. No fires were lit. The beacon emitted nothing visible, but its presence could be felt. A hum beneath the bones. It was as if the world held its breath every time the pulse fired. The natives did not approach the beacon site. They watched from afar. Their gift stopped. Their presence faded. It wasn't disapproval. It was distance. As if they too recognized that something ancient was being stirred, something that did not belong entirely to Peridea. By the end of the 6th week, Thrawn had gathered every known map of the unknown regions, both modern and pre-collapse. None aligned with Peridea's starfield. But when overlaid with the glyph spirals found in the force chambers, a faint trail emerged, an arc that bent not toward Coruscant or Corellia, but toward forgotten systems lost during the great hyperspace collapse. The crew had no names for these stars, but the Peridea did. Thrawn marked each path with a numbered sequence. He began testing combinations. Each variation pulsed a new rhythm into the beacon, a new message, a new map. Still no response. Until the 8th week. The pulse had just fired when a technician monitoring long-range distortions noticed an anomaly, a bend in ambient radiation, faint but steady. A slow warp just at the edge of perception. No heat, no mass, just pressure spreading out like a ripple through space. The Peridea did not appear, but something had heard. Thrawn didn't react. He had expected the delay. Contact would never be instant. The creatures traveled vast gulfs without propulsion. They didn't listen to time the way others did. He refined the sequence again, this time incorporating angular momentum derived from the tilt of Peridea's moon, a subtle influence on local gravity that might guide the whales more precisely toward orbit. More days passed. Clouds moved sluggishly over the beacon site, never casting full shadows. Rain avoided the plateau. Wind rolled around it. Everything deferred. The crew continued their duties with practiced focus: ship maintenance, resource management, scouting. But eyes drifted upward more often. Conversations shortened. Rest came later. They knew the signal had changed something. They didn't know when it would return. Elros proposed modifying the beacon to send short bursts of encoded data during pulses, translating their presence into patterned light. Thrawn declined. Too much interference. The whales wouldn't read words. They would read intent, shape, frequency. It was enough that they felt the pull. One evening, without warning, the clouds parted. No pulse had been fired. No tremors had registered. But there they were. 6 Purgil, gliding silently above the mountains, their bellies glowing with deep blue light. They made no descent, no sound, just circled once, twice, then vanished back into the dark. The beacon had been acknowledged. Thrawn made no speech. He simply walked the perimeter of the plateau, confirmed the readings, and nodded. Then he ordered construction on the secondary phase, a hyperspace transponder, built not for ships, but for paths. A device to align the Chimaera's systems with the route the Purgil followed. One that could, if calibrated correctly, create a momentary window. Not open it, not force it, just catch it. As it passed, quiet preparations resumed under the cold skies. The signal would continue, the path would be drawn, and the return would wait no longer. Time on Peridea refused to move the way it did in known space. The stars held their shape, but their rhythm felt different, too slow, too steady. Days bled into each other, weeks stretched like threads pulled taut. The planet remained unmoved, no seasonal change, no wind shift, just silence, broken only by the patterns the crew imposed to stay sane. Routine became armor: wake, work, watch, rest, repeat. Thrawn never deviated. Each morning before the first rotation of the sentry posts, he stood near the remains of the Chimaera's dorsal wing. There he reviewed updates, power output, supply rotation, beacon signal variants, Purgil sightings, crew health. His gloved hands behind his back, his eyes on the horizon, not waiting, calculating. 3 full months had passed since the first test signal. Still no breach, no return, but no retreat either. The beacon continued its pulse. Once every hour it sang its quiet message into the stars, inaudible to the ear, but steady in its reach. A signal not of desperation, but of design. Not a plea, a path. The crew moved beneath it day by day, maintaining the camp with machine-like precision. Small repairs, soil sampling, defensive checks. They worked as if the return would come tomorrow, or never. Neither changed the task. Discipline, even in exile. But beneath the order, thoughts lingered. The galaxy they had left behind, was it still the same? Had the Empire, or what remained of it, endured in some form? Had someone replaced Thrawn? Had the Republic swallowed the last embers of Imperial ambition? Rumors began in the mess lines, passed quietly over dry rations and water flasks. Someone said the Emperor's contingency plan had failed. Another said a remnant fleet still existed in the Outer Rim, hiding in fractured sectors, waiting for a leader. Others spoke of Grand Moff Gideon, or a figure called Snoke. No names confirmed, no facts. Only ghosts passed through quiet mouths. Some feared what might be waiting. Others feared nothing would be. They wondered if returning meant a rest, or glory, or a forgotten name lost in a galaxy that had simply moved on. Thrawn heard these murmurs, not from direct reports, but from absence, from changed tones, shortened phrases, eyes that didn't hold contact quite as long. It didn't concern him. Fear was expected, doubt was manageable. Discipline would carry them where certainty could not. Still, he made adjustments. New shifts were added, tactical simulations twice per week, silent drills across the outer ridges, mapping exercises that required full team coordination, not training for survival, training for return, not just physically, but mentally. He began meeting individually with officers at irregular intervals, not to reprimand but to question, not interrogation, conversation. He asked what they observed, what they predicted, what choices they would make in the absence of his orders. Their answers mattered less than their reasoning. Loyalty could not be measured by uniform, only by thought. He spent long hours reviewing galactic projections based on pre-exile data, imperial strongholds, planetary allegiances, regional instability. He factored in decay, insurgency, and economic collapse. Without intervention, the old order would not hold. It would have fractured. But fracture, he knew, created opportunity. Power despises a vacuum. The native allies did not interfere. They continued their strange rhythm, quiet visits, wordless gestures, offerings left at the perimeter of the camp. One day, they brought a woven map made of dyed threads and bone needles. No one could read it. But Thrawn placed it beside the last beacon reading, and the alignment was too precise to dismiss. They understood return. They did not speak of it. Each night, as the mists gathered and the lights dimmed, the plateau fell quiet. The beacon pulsed. The skies above it remained still. No ships, no flashes, no breach. But hope did not break under silence. It adapted. There were days the crew felt it more acutely, days when nothing moved, when even the wind fell away and the world seemed frozen, as if time had folded over itself. Those were the hardest. But Thrawn never wavered. He spent his evenings charting, not the stars, but the people under his command, strengths, weaknesses, behavioral shifts, loyalty indicators. He recorded names not just for record, but for future position. Not everyone would return in the same role they left. The return, when it came, would not be rescue. It would be renewal. Some of the younger crew fantasized about vengeance, about striking at the Republic from the shadows. Others dreamed of rebuilding. Others just wanted to go home. Thrawn considered all of it, but promised none of it. He promised only structure, and structure endured. The fourth month arrived without fanfare. Another pulse, another sunrise. The vigil continued. But beneath the stillness, the weight of preparation had grown thick. The crew no longer asked when. They simply waited for Thrawn to say, now. The beacon activated at first light. Not a flare, not a burst of flame or flash of signal, just a shift, a low, steady pulse radiating outward like a tide beneath perception. The plateau remained silent. No lights blinked. No alarms rang. The only confirmation was the thin vibration felt through the soles of boots pressed to stone. The signal had begun its final cycle. It reached upward, slow and deliberate, threading its way between stars, latching to the faint gravitational trails left behind by the Purgil. The frequency, tuned over months, was no longer experimental. It was direction, precision, intention. The crew watched the sky, not with hope, with readiness. Thrawn did not stand with them. He observed from the observation platform, arms crossed, cloak still, eyes focused on the sky's edge. His expression did not change. He had known this would come. The timing was only a matter of when the galaxy would open its ears again. Beneath him, technicians monitored the signal's strength. Atmospheric interference was minimal. Cosmic drift, as expected, adjusted the path slightly. Corrections made. The pulse held steady. Then, a pause. One long gap in the wave, followed by a counter-resonance, a soft echo in return. Confirmation. The Pergil had heard them. Below, the camp shifted without word. No formal order was needed. Teams gathered tools. Equipment was disassembled and packed. Shelters taken down. Field instruments sealed in crates. Years of survival stripped in silence, piece by piece, without the rhythm of music or marching. Just work, just motion. This was not retreat. This was readiness. The sky began to darken by the time the final systems were sealed. Not with storm, but shadow. The first Pergil breached the upper atmosphere silently, its massive form glowing faintly beneath the clouds. Another followed, then 3 more. Their trails curled together, drawing wide arcs over the distant ridges. They were not in a rush. They circled, patient, waiting for alignment. They had come not to collect, but to escort. Night fell without ceremony. Fires were kept low. The perimeter lights powered down for the final time. No guards were posted. There was no threat left, only memory. Thrawn walked the edge of the beacon site alone. The stone beneath him was dry and cold. The air around him perfectly still, no wind, no birdsong, just the distant hum of life moving on its own terms. He paused beside the remains of the first relay, an early model now obsolete, half buried in moss. He did not touch it. He simply regarded it the way he regarded every piece of a larger machine. Functional once, discarded now, but necessary in its time. Footsteps approached behind him. Elros, no words spoken, just a nod. Thrawn returned it, and the lieutenant faded back into the dark. Others did the same. Voss, the engineering leads, 3 native observers. One by one, each came to that spot, then turned away. There was no farewell. Peridea did not demand one. The native beings left a final gift that night. At the base of the transponder tower, they placed a ring of smoothed stones, each carved with a single spiral. No 2 were the same. All faced inward. No offering was made. No figure appeared. But in that quiet, the meaning was clear. This place had allowed them to stay. Now it would allow them to go. In his private quarters, Thrawn reviewed the last logs. Energy stability within margin. Beacon cycle locked. Crew manifests accounted for. Navigation alignment set. The hyperspace corridor that had once brought them here was still uncharted, still unsanctioned, but it existed, and now it could be followed back. He looked up at the small chart pinned to the far wall. Stars connected by charcoal lines, annotated with marks no galactic map had used in centuries. His own hand had drawn it, not digitally, not mathematically, intuitively. He had read the Pergil's path, matched it, refined it. Now he would follow it. He extinguished the lights. Outside, the stars sharpened. The Pergil had formed a slow spiral overhead, their luminous trails weaving together, opening a tear in the night sky that shimmered with pale blue light. A corridor, not forced, invited. The Chimaera, repaired and silent for so long, rumbled once. Engines sparked to life, contained, steady. The signal was acknowledged. Trajectory matched. Thrust minimal. Thrawn boarded without ceremony. The command deck lit slowly as systems activated. The crew took positions without a single order voiced. They had waited long enough. The ship rose. No banners, no horns, no cheers. Only wind, finally stirring across the plateau, scattering dust left behind by hands that once built fires and rationed water. Below, the stone spirals remained. Thrawn stood at the viewport as Peridea shrank beneath them, grey forests, curved hills, crystal ridges fading into shadow. No emotion crossed his face, but his thoughts were exact. This world had not broken them. It had shaped them, and what it had given, silence, focus, survival, would not be wasted. He turned from the glass, faced the stars. Return was not revenge, it was strategy, and the galaxy would soon remember the shape of discipline. They broke through the edge of known space without fanfare. No Republic sensors marked their entry. No hyperspace lanes recognized the pattern of their arrival. The Chimaera emerged like a shadow cut from silence, its hull scarred but functional, an instrument of order reborn in a galaxy that had forgotten it. The starfield had shifted since they left. Known constellations were dimmer now, occluded by drifting debris and collapsed systems. Communications traffic filled the void, but the language had changed. New protocols, new codes, new powers speaking without a single unifying command. Thrawn stood at the forward viewport, silent. Below him, navigators traced their position relative to the last Imperial stronghold recorded in their archives. It no longer existed. A burn mark remained where a fortress world once held the line. The Republic had erased it, not through occupation, but abandonment. Scans revealed scattered signatures across nearby sectors, remnant fleets, scavenger bands, fragment governors still clinging to Imperial colors long since bleached by time. None had real control. They barked orders into a void. No one listened. But Thrawn did. He watched every broadcast, studied every transmission, not for news, for tone, fear, arrogance, desperation. Each frequency revealed something. Every silence spoke louder than the words. The Chimaera remained cloaked, drifting along passive lines through neglected corridors of space, avoiding major lanes. Their first stop was a derelict supply depot nestled in the gravity well of a dead moon. Untouched for years. No guards, no traps. Inside, sealed crates of munitions, fuel, and encrypted data cores still hummed with faint energy. It was the first of many forgotten caches. Thrawn said nothing of victory. He called it inventory. Recon probes were dispatched in every direction. Stealth class, masked emissions. Their orders: observe, record, return. One by one, they mapped the outlines of a fractured galaxy, what remained of the Empire, what had replaced it, and what might still be built. What Thrawn saw was not weakness. It was opportunity. The Republic held territory, but not minds. Their influence sprawled, unfocused, stretched thin across systems that barely remembered the Clone Wars, let alone the rise and fall of the Empire. Peace was declared, but unrest whispered through planetary markets and border colonies. Pirate factions surged. Black market trade routes flourished. The myth of unity had replaced unity itself. Order, real order, was absent. Thrawn reviewed reports daily, seated in the central command chamber, lights dimmed, maps projected in thin blue light across the air. He marked points of interest not by size or strength, but by instability, power vacuums, economic vulnerability, cultural unrest. He studied them the way a sculptor studies a block of stone, not for what it was, but what could be carved from it. The officers followed his lead. No celebrations, no declarations, only tasks, schedules, systems returning to motion. They did not speak of the return to Peridea. It was behind them now, like the shape of a blade returned to its sheath. One system in particular drew his attention: Deron Prime, a once loyal world, now stripped of leadership after an internal coup, left its infrastructure collapsed and its people under the control of independent militias. The Republic had sent envoys, none returned. Thrawn studied every detail. He sent no ships. He did not interfere. Instead, he sent misinformation. Anonymous communications from one faction to another, staged transmissions of weapons deliveries that never existed, subtle mentions of a figure, unnamed, unseen, rising among the remnants of Imperial command. Within 2 weeks, the militias turned on each other. 3 days later, the system declared martial law under a newly installed governor wearing an Imperial uniform recovered from a cache long thought abandoned. Thrawn never spoke to him, never appeared. He didn't need to. Elsewhere, ships once mothballed in the Outer Rim were recovered. Droid factories buried beneath scorched worlds were reactivated under false identities. Former Imperial officers, long believed lost, were located through voice print tracking across unguarded comm frequencies. Thrawn did not seek to restore the Empire as it was. He sought to shape what came next, not a return, a refinement. He charted the path not from nostalgia, but precision. The Empire had fallen not through weakness of ideals, but through blindness of execution. He would not repeat it. He studied the Republic too, their military doctrine, their command structure, their new Jedi. He did not fear them. He studied them because no strategist feared tools. He understood tools, and he understood that strategy was patience made visible. The Chimaera, still cloaked, remained in motion, never resting in one system too long. It left no wake, no trace, only whispers. A ship seen briefly near a collapsed relay. A strange signature picked up by a lone scout ship, gone before verification. A shadow across a moon. Rumors began. Some said a Grand Admiral had returned. Others claimed it was a clone or a ghost, or a myth constructed by warlords to keep order through fear. No confirmations, no denials. Thrawn allowed it. Rumors had weight, and weight shifted balance. He did not need the galaxy to believe in him yet. He only needed it to feel the shape of something approaching. And slowly, across systems worn thin by complacency, that shape began to form. The first messages were embedded in trade code, ordinary transmissions used by freighters across forgotten sectors. They carried no insignia, no name, only patterns, pulses in frequency that meant nothing to outsiders. But to those who remembered the Empire, to those who had once memorized communication matrices and chain of command cadence, the message was unmistakable. He had returned. No formal announcement, no demand, no invitation. A presence beneath the noise. Across fragmented star systems, ex-Imperial officers took notice. Some were still in hiding, tucked deep within asteroid enclaves or buried inside failed mining colonies. Others had found work under new names, advising planetary militias or brokering arms in neutral space. They did not speak of their pasts. They had long accepted that no banner would rise for them again. But the pattern reached them, carefully, one at a time. It asked a simple question: are you still useful? Responses came slowly. Not in allegiance, but in movement. Encrypted signals from unknown ports, supply shifts traced to dormant strongholds, a half-broken dreadnought reactivated in a forgotten dry dock near the Varn Nebula, its engines humming again after a decade of silence. No flag was raised, no fleet was summoned, just motion. Thrawn observed each reply. He didn't respond immediately. He tracked them first. Their choices, how they re-entered the network, what resources they drew, who they contacted, and who they avoided. Loyalty was measured in restraint. Eventually, contact was made, direct but discreet. Thrawn selected neutral ground, an orbital station above a lifeless moon, long abandoned after the fall of Kuat's eastern manufacturing ring. The facility remained intact, its structure hollowed by time, perfect for quiet meetings without surveillance. The first to arrive was Commander Rathal, once a strategist under the Outer Rim Command, known for ruthless efficiency and tactical clarity. Then Moff Yavin, a survivor from the core collapse, who brought with him encrypted logs detailing rebel troop movement from years past. A technician, known only by his designation, DT-4, arrived shortly after, carrying fragments of droid networks the Republic never discovered. Others followed, names lost to time but minds still sharp. They met in silence, no titles used, no ranks reinstated. Thrawn entered last, no guards, no speech. He walked slowly into the hollow chamber, eyes scanning each face. He carried nothing, no holoprojector, no datapad, just memory. When he spoke, it was soft. He asked them what they remembered of the Empire's final years, not statistics but failures, where it fractured, where command faltered, where loyalty thinned. One by one they answered. He listened. He didn't correct. He redirected, pointed to moments they had overlooked, miscalculations buried beneath apparent victories, strategic flaws in the Emperor's doctrine, misused fleets, misunderstood rebellions, mistakes repeated out of arrogance. No one challenged him. His voice didn't rise. His words carried no venom, but they cut clean. By the end of the discussion, no one questioned who led. He didn't claim power. He revealed its shape and allowed them to step into its shadow. In the following weeks, the network grew, not through fanfare or flags, through contact. A whisper to a weapons supplier on the edge of Ytres, a nod in a shadow port beneath the remnants of Morbin Station. A former admiral handed an assignment with no instructions, just coordinates and cargo, each task simple, measured, essential. No name attached, but when results returned, efficient, precise, untraceable, those involved knew who had sent them. Rumors spread faster than ships. Some said he had a fleet hidden in dark space. Others believed he had unlocked Force relics beyond the grasp of both Jedi and Sith. A few swore he had been guided by the Purrgil themselves, that the stars bent around his return. Thrawn allowed every myth to grow. They served his purpose better than any broadcast. He focused on structure, logistics, rebuilding the chain, link by link, never rushed. Each piece had to fit without flaw. Old admirals vetted, new assets tested through proxy, alliances formed not with vows, but shared efficiency. One of the earliest tests was conducted in the Terran Drift. A Republic convoy transporting prototype shielding tech passed through the sector without escort, relying on classified routes. It vanished mid-transit. No debris, no survivors, just a delay in Republic supply chains, and an increase in black market shielding tech near mid-rim colonies. No signature, no fingerprint. But those within the growing network recognized the work. Thrawn didn't take credit. He didn't need to. In silence, control was building. The clandestine council reconvened twice more, each meeting more confident, more voices, ideas surfaced. Some proposed military strikes, others urged propaganda campaigns, a few suggested mass conscription through outer systems. Thrawn listened, then discarded each suggestion with quiet precision. He didn't speak of armies or conquest. He spoke of systems, of behavior, of the mistake the Republic had made, ruling from above, not within. He would not repeat it. His empire would not arrive with thunder. It would seep, quiet, measured, inevitable. And those who gathered in the shadow of the fallen empire began to understand. They weren't reclaiming power. They were becoming its architects. The Republic didn't see it. They couldn't. Their systems were built for war, not whispers. Their security relied on eyes pointed at visible threats. Warlords, separatist holdouts, criminal cartels. What grew beneath those systems passed unnoticed, not because it hid in shadows, but because it moved like dust in the wind. Small, unremarkable, unthreatening. But each grain was placed with care. It began with supply lines, uncharted routes between neutral colonies and neglected refueling stations. Thrawn didn't disrupt them. He rerouted them. Silent interference, never enough to cause alarm. Delays in transit that forced smugglers to take longer paths. That meant they burned more fuel. That meant they bought more. From ports his agents now controlled. They didn't know it, but they paid him. Slowly, their dependence shifted, and no one in the Republic's infrastructure noticed. Merchant guilds were next. Thrawn's agents posed not as soldiers or emissaries, but as brokers. Quiet voices offering stability in exchange for logistical access. Not territory, just warehousing rights, transport clearances, data logs. Most agreed without question. A stable customer was a rare commodity in an unstable market. In one sector, a fuel depot changed hands 3 times before anyone realized it had been reactivated under a false charter. By then, it supplied 5 major trade lanes, all untraceable, all controlled. Simultaneously, deep scouts followed old Imperial records, lists of forgotten worlds, off-the-book operations, sealed orders issued in the final months before the collapse. Many had been abandoned, some destroyed, but a few still waited. On a burned world beneath a glass desert, they found Vault L-99, an underground armory never listed on any official manifest. 200 deactivated walker units, 6 long-range artillery mechs, 50,000 rifles sealed in vacuum-tight lockers. Every system powered down but intact. Thrawn did not deploy them. He catalogued, stored, logged. Another planet yielded an orbital facility hidden behind the debris ring of a dead moon. A shipyard, overgrown with frost and time, but the frames of TIE variants still hung suspended in docking cradles. Repair droids remained in hibernation, waiting for a signal. It took only days to wake them. Thrawn sent no fleet, no battalion, just 2 engineers and a remote relay. The lights came back on, other caches were less grand. A single cargo freighter here, a forgotten listening post there, but each one added weight, not immediately, not visibly, but measurably. A new scaffold raised in pieces across the bones of the old galaxy, and none of it triggered alerts. The Republic tracked movements, not intentions. It monitored strength, not patience. Thrawn built nothing loud, nothing visible, only pieces. He allowed others to move first. In the Zevon corridor, a small-scale conflict erupted between 2 trade federations, provoked quietly by falsified invoices and misdirected shipments. When the Republic arrived to mediate, their presence fractured the alliance, not restored it. They left behind a vacuum. One of Thrawn's agents filled it. No uniform, no flag, just results. The same happened near Velestri Prime, where an independent security firm began training local defense forces in exchange for access to old Republic comm satellites. Those satellites were then rerouted to relay data to shadow nodes, nodes connected to a wider net being woven by unseen hands. On every front, Thrawn moved without force. He replaced dependency, he replaced memory, and still no declaration, no broadcast, no call to arms. Just silence that shaped itself into structure. The crews beneath him followed orders without question. Each team compartmentalized, each operation buried beneath layers of cover identities. Even within the growing council, not all knew the full scope. That was by design. Information flowed upward, but never laterally. Control didn't come from unity. It came from precision. He studied data daily, not just outcomes, but patterns, where the Republic's attention drifted, where patrols increased, where supply tightened. He moved around these shifts, not against them. He allowed their pressure to guide him like current around stone. Efficiency, not conquest. He didn't need systems to kneel. He needed them to function. And when they did, his influence grew. On board the Chimaera, the command deck remained quiet. No overt fleet activity, no visible displays of power, only strategy, tracked through variables and percentages, each acquisition a node, each movement a thread. Together, a web, not yet a trap, but soon a net. The first prototype droid was reactivated during the fourth phase, a modified KX unit, its programming refined, directives rewritten, not for battle, for coordination. It managed shipment logistics across 3 systems without revealing a single Imperial signature. It didn't speak unless spoken to. It obeyed encrypted prompts. Its eyes glowed faintly, blue, not red. When it finished its first cycle, Thrawn ordered 1,000 more, not deployed, stored. One more piece. The council met briefly, fewer words this time, more metrics. Reports returned clean, networks expanding, profits rising, military attention low, threat detection at 0. It was working. They asked when the next phase would begin. Thrawn simply responded, "When they feel safest." Then he stood and left them to prepare. The first operatives did not wear uniforms. They didn't travel aboard marked ships or enter through expected channels. They arrived quietly, folded into trade convoys, scientific delegations, merchant caravans, and diplomatic missions. None bore the insignia of the Empire. Most carried false names, falsified documents, entire fabricated lives. They did not come to fight. They came to listen. Every agent was briefed not with objectives but with conditions. No timeline, no target, only directives. Observe tension, exploit silence, identify fracture points within the Republic's overstretched structure. In the core, one embedded analyst intercepted environmental control codes for a military outpost orbiting Sarnal 4. She didn't disrupt the systems. She adjusted heating by 3 degrees every week, enough to cause mechanical strain, then filed the maintenance reports herself. No alarms were raised, but the base fell behind on 2 deployments as engineers searched for phantom faults. On Varys, a logistics handler redirected minor medical shipments between depots. A shipment scheduled for the Ray Medical Station arrived 5 days late, causing temporary unrest among the sector's refugees. The unrest drew media attention. The media attention forced local officials to demand more resources. Those resources were pulled from another sector. Small actions, measured consequences. Thrawn read every report. He tracked not the events, but the reactions, where the Republic tightened its grip, where it ignored, where it hesitated. These patterns mattered more than damage. His objective was not destruction, it was uncertainty. In a galaxy that prided itself on peace, uncertainty was chaos. Sabotage came slowly. A security relay on Daln Prime blinked out for 17 seconds during a scheduled transfer. No files lost, no evidence found. But when the signal returned, a single keystroke had altered a maintenance algorithm, rerouting internal data through a redundant mirror system controlled by Thrawn's operatives. A subtle backdoor, no alarms triggered. On Kelthros Station, a fire suppression system failed to activate during a cargo hold spark. The blaze was contained, the damage minor, but the incident sowed doubt in local engineering protocols. New audits were initiated. They uncovered nothing of value, but they consumed 3 weeks of labor, delaying other inspections. Every move appeared accidental. None pointed toward a larger hand, but within the Republic's data flow, gaps had begun to form. Discrepancies, misdirection, systems reporting errors that didn't exist. Every false anomaly forced focus away from real vulnerabilities. Every corrected file buried something less obvious. Movement reports, raw fuel shipment logs, encrypted messages now carrying additional metadata encoded in repetition patterns. The Republic never noticed. Not because they were blind, because they weren't looking for ghosts. Rumors followed, not from agents, from civilians. Merchant captains spoke of convoys disappearing in uncharted space. Colonists whispered about mysterious patrols that came and went without identification. A senator from the Mid-Rim reported that her encrypted messages had been delayed or rerouted. No proof, no breach, just discomfort. One council aide in Hosnian Prime mentioned an old name, Thrawn, not as fact, as speculation. The name was dismissed, laughed off, a myth used by broken admirals and backwater officers to explain the parts of the galaxy they didn't understand. But it was spoken. That was the beginning. Soon after, a hyperspace lane was jammed for 17 hours. The Republic's nav charts listed it as a gravitational surge. Quietly, in private circles, another theory emerged. A cloaked fleet was testing new transit disruption technology. No one offered proof. But uncertainty had already done its work. Thrawn's operatives never left messages. They left patterns, slight shifts in protocol, minor contradictions, moments of doubt embedded in systems built on routine. Where trust in reliability faltered, control weakened. And in those cracks, he moved. More agents were activated, not all within the Republic. Some placed in neutral systems, others embedded in the rising black market tech rings growing in the Outer Rim. Their presence wasn't to seize control. It was to shape perception. One slicer transmitted a false communique across a scavenger network, posing as a remnant admiral. The message was intercepted by 3 different syndicates. None verified it, but all passed it along. By the end of the week, 6 outer systems had increased patrol activity against a threat that didn't exist. Fear was efficient. Moff Yavin, now overseeing 5 cells of embedded agents, reported increased success across civil infrastructure. Republic resources were reacting to rumors more than reality. The perception of threat had outpaced the presence of it. This was the moment Thrawn had planned for. Not dominance, doubt. The Republic had created a peace that needed constant reassurance, and reassurance required trust. Once trust bent, pressure followed, and pressure could be guided. On board the Chimaera, the Council met again. No celebratory tone, no declarations, just confirmation. The Gambit had begun, and the galaxy would not know where the next hand was placed. Beyond the edge of all charted space, where gravitational anomalies bent even the most advanced navigation systems and subspace signals faded into static, there existed a graveyard. Not of debris or wreckage, but of silence. A forgotten anchorage swallowed by the unknown regions, buried beneath layers of solar mist and roving radiation belts. This place had no name. It was never meant to be found again. Thrawn found it. Vaulted in secrecy, the fleet had been hidden long before the collapse. positioned for a contingency that never arrived. 12 Star Destroyers, 3 Dread-class cruisers, multiple escort frigates, support carriers, atmospheric gunships, all entombed in passive standby, automated systems keeping them dormant, drifting. Most believed they had been consumed in the chaos of the final Imperial retreat. Others never knew they existed. But the data had survived. Fragmented coordinates buried in deep command files, pieced together through weeks of triangulated cross-referencing. When the location was confirmed, Thrawn didn't announce it to the Council. He departed quietly aboard the Chimaera, accompanied by a skeleton crew and a single transport. The arrival was unceremonious. No lights, no contact, just forms emerging from fog, ghosts of war. The ships remained inert, power signatures buried beneath layers of shielding, their hulls held firm, Imperial craftsmanship untouched by time. Some bore scars from skirmishes that had never been recorded. Others drifted in near-perfect symmetry like models awaiting display. All had one thing in common: potential. Thrawn spent 3 days aboard the lead vessel, Judicator Ascendant. He made no changes, no repairs. He walked each corridor, reviewed each system manually, bypassing automated scans. He paused at control stations, rechecked ventilation flow, recalibrated dormant sensors. This wasn't inspection. It was reacquaintance, a commander revisiting tools left in storage. Once satisfied, he summoned his chosen crews. Not volunteers, not recruits, loyalists. Every individual selected by name, drawn from the scattered cells that had proven most disciplined. Officers who had not broken rank after the Empire's fall. Engineers who kept systems running under Exile. Pilots trained not in numbers, but geometry. They arrived in silence, issued no ceremonial oaths. They stepped aboard and resumed their roles as if no time had passed. Instructions came directly from Thrawn. No second in command, no delegation. Each task assigned with clinical purpose. Power was restored incrementally. Not all at once, one system at a time. Primary engines were run through low-yield calibration. Weapon batteries rechecked, but not activated. Life support systems fully flushed and rewritten with new bioencoding, tailored to prevent sabotage. Communications remained isolated, no outward signals, internal channels only. Each ship brought back to life slowly, deliberately. The fleet's formation shifted, from drift to alignment. Old formations were not replicated. Thrawn restructured them entirely. A vanguard shaped not for intimidation, but function. 3 cruisers designated for suppression. 6 destroyers recalibrated for blockade and isolation. 2 carriers redesigned to deliver mechanized infantry, modified with updated drop protocols to accommodate hostile terrain. 1 vessel, Nemesis Vane, was converted into a mobile command hub. Thrawn personally configured its bridge. No wide command decks, no sweeping holotables. Instead, a quiet core, compact, shielded, focused. Tactics shaped not in grandeur, but in precision. As systems came online, drills began. Simulated incursions, strategic retreats, coordinated blackout response. Each officer observed. Each mistake corrected not with reprimand, but with redirection. The goal was not obedience. It was efficiency. These ships would not scream their presence into the void. They would not broadcast loyalty to a fallen emperor. They would operate in the space between conflicts, arriving only when necessary, speaking only when silence had failed. Thrawn designated them the Pale Vanguard, a name unspoken by the crews. It did not appear on official logs, but it passed quietly between departments, between shift rotations and encryption keys, a symbol not of return, but of precision restored. Logistics followed. The fleet's dormant reserves had survived. Munitions, rations, raw materials, enough to operate for a year without resupply. Additional shipments began arriving via unregistered transports, orchestrated by agents who had no idea what they were delivering. Each part routed through 3 locations. No ship saw its destination. No cargo matched its manifest. Security remained airtight. No data left the region. Only one signal pulsed quietly, triangulated across multiple systems, a simple beacon encoded in spiral harmonics. The same frequency Thrawn had once used on Peridea. The fleet responded. One by one, ships engaged their transponders, not broadcasting identity, but alignment, a frequency of readiness. Within a month, the fleet had moved into full orbit, not around a planet, around a void. An open segment of space cleared by grav field manipulation. No natural objects, no strategic value, no attention. It became their staging ground. The first deployment drills were executed under full stealth protocols. Drop maneuvers in blind space, recovery tests under ECM fog. Communications jammed intentionally mid-sequence to test command autonomy. Success rate, 97.4%. Acceptable. Thrawn returned to the Chimaera, leaving no marker behind. The pale vanguard remained, their engines idled, their weapons stayed cold. But the galaxy had shifted, and the spear was now in place. The New Republic, vast and self-congratulatory, believed its reach extended farther than it did. On paper, its systems stretched from the core to the scattered colonies near the outer rim. But those declarations were little more than ink. The true map, the one Thrawn studied, was drawn in influence, not borders. In the mid-rim, sectors swayed not from loyalty, but necessity. One shipment too late, one official too distant, and stability began to fray. Thrawn's agents moved in those margins, arriving not as conquerors, but as solutions. They offered no doctrine, no flag, just quiet assistance, conditional access to long-forgotten resources, or simple favors that carried invisible threads. The planetary syndic of Volis 9 received a gift, an atmospheric modulator prototype capable of neutralizing his planet's acidic storms. It arrived anonymously. Within days, the syndic repealed his trade agreement with the Republic and stopped responding to sector diplomats. No one investigated. Volis was considered minor, unremarkable. On Hentari, local elections were disrupted not through violence, but mathematics. Thrawn's operatives recalculated debt ratios and tax scales, exposing flaws in the Republic-appointed governor's administration. A rival candidate rose, popular, charismatic, backed quietly by an unknown benefactor. She won by a narrow margin. Her first act was to privatize the Hentari orbital docks. That dockyard now serviced ships with unregistered codes. Thrawn didn't claim allegiance. He simply arranged advantage. Diplomacy for him was not negotiation. It was correction. A system broken by neglect could be rewired through leverage, one agreement at a time. Beneath these planetary deals ran deeper veins, connections with the underworld, where currency meant more than credits. Crime syndicates, spice runners, arms dealers, all fragmented since the fall of the Hutt cartel, and all desperate for structure without oversight. Thrawn offered neither control nor chaos. He offered predictability. In the Corran Belt, he met with the head of the Veiled Chain, a syndicate known for trafficking exotic tech through black holes and salvage zones. No guards, no weapons drawn, just data. Coordinates of a crashed Republic transport carrying classified droid cores. He gave it freely. In return, the chain rerouted half their shipments through neutral lanes, Thrawn had already secured. They didn't know they'd joined a structure. On Ord Thentis, an unmarked frigate landed beneath the cover of a sandstorm. Its crew met with the remnants of the Black Sun's disbanded leadership. What was offered wasn't ships or weapons, it was logistics. Access to warehouses disguised as Republic depots, pre-stocked with high-grade supplies, waiting to be stolen. The underworld's hunger fed Thrawn's engine, but he kept his distance. He never sat in on these negotiations. He never threatened. He never revealed more than a whisper. His envoys carried no titles, no uniforms. They spoke softly, promised little, but delivered always. In every agreement, there were terms unseen. Shipments timed to distract border patrols, refueling hubs placed precisely along migration corridors. Private security companies established to monitor outer colonies, all subcontracted by shell organizations that ultimately reported back to Thrawn's central ledger. By the time the Republic noticed fluctuations in outer sector stability, it was already too late. Trade disruptions in the Telvanni Reach, communication lag between inner ring command stations, an unexplained delay in the reassignment of enforcement vessels. The systems weren't failing. They were being reprogrammed, slowly, silently. On board the Chimaera, Thrawn monitored progress from a sparse chamber filled only with star charts, logistical projections, and transcripts from intercepted Republic Senate debates. He circled systems not by proximity, but by relevance. Which planets would become keystones? Which factions were nearest collapse? Which gaps in trust could become corridors of power? He circled Loran Prime, home to a civilian tech council recently granted Republic infrastructure contracts. Their shipments had increased, but their support had not. A message was sent, not a demand, a suggestion. 3 days later, Loran Prime's transport guild shifted from Republic escort to private protection, an outfit funded unknowingly by Thrawn's own trade networks. Each of these actions built no empire. Not yet, but they planted its shape. The new Republic saw none of it. They remained preoccupied with rebuilding fleets that hadn't fought in years. They argued over committee rulings, investigated rumors of resurgent Imperial cells in all the wrong sectors. They chased shadows. Thrawn didn't need their focus. He needed their distraction. The Council convened again on a coded transmission link. Brief, encrypted, eyes only. Moff Yavin reported success on 3 additional fronts. Commander Rathal listed 2 new planetary overseers brought under silent control. Even DT-4, the droid liaison, had secured communication satellites in the northern quadrant without engaging a single weapon. Thrawn nodded once, then spoke 5 words. The stage is nearly set. The others waited for more. He said nothing. There was nothing left to explain. Power was no longer claimed. It was being assembled.